This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to do a smackdown between the Sony VAIO Z 3rd generation, call it the Z3 if you want, 13.1-inch super ultra portable computer, and the Sony VAIO S13, a 13.3-inch, also ultra portable, not as much. Big difference first between these two, obviously, is not looks. They look an awful lot alike, don't they? Both of these happen to have carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is standard for the Z model, and it's optional on the premium model. You get it with the Sony VAIO S, otherwise known as the SA. So looks-wise, made by the same company, same design aesthetic, Sony's new full flat look they call it, but in terms of price, you're talking about almost twice as much of a difference depending on the configurations you go with. Now, the most base model of the Sony VAIO S is $799, but it is pretty basic. You do get full mobile core CPUs, 3rd generation Ivy Bridge, 2.5 gigahertz is the starting point for the i5 there. And in the US, you can also get the VAIO Z with a Core i5. It's also a full mobile CPU. Now, in some countries, it only comes with the i7, but we're talking about the US here. The base model for the Sony VAIO Z with the Core i5 is $1599, so almost twice as much difference in price. But I think where a lot of people are going to be looking is in this particular configuration right here. They want something a little higher end in the VAIO S, and they're starting to notice that they can creep up to the price of the VAIO Z. Now, the premium edition starts at $1,119 on the VAIO S, and that gets that Core i5 2.5 gigahertz CPU, Intel HD 4000 graphics, and dedicated NVIDIA GeForce GT 640 and LE with 1 gig of dedicated VRAM. With the Sony VAIO Z, there's no room for dedicated graphics in there, so you're just going to have Intel HD 4000 graphics. Now, Sony sells an optional portable media dock that's $400, and that interestingly connects to the LightPeak connector, which really does double duty with one of the USB ports there on the side, and that has a dedicated GPU, but it's not the world's greatest GPU. It's the 6550. They're going to refresh that up to the 7000 series, but still nominally a little bit under the performance, certainly, of the GT 640 that's in your VAIO S, for those of you who are into serious gaming or need a lot of graphics processing for video and that kind of thing. But while we're talking about performance, the surprising thing is the VAIO Z, this little 2.5-pound notebook, is available with the quad-core i7. If you go up to $2,000, $1,949 to $1,999, depending on whether you want Windows Home or Professional, you get a quad-core i7 CPU clocked at 2.3 gigahertz. Really handy if you're doing video editing there, where processing power can help a lot. And on the Sony VAIO S, I think because Sony doesn't really want to cannibalize their Z sales and the paragon nature of that Z there, you can only go up to a Core i7 dual core. So you can actually get more processing power out of the little skinny VAIO Z. Unexpected but true. In terms of displays, again, you're going to get what you pay for. The premium edition on the Sony VAIO S that we have here, 1600 by 900 pixel display, TN panel, also TN panel on the Sony VAIO Z, but that one's 1920 by 1080. And it's such a good sharp display that you can actually still read text at that resolution, even though it is a 13.1-inch panel. Honestly, I like the panel on the VAIO S pretty well. It has nice color saturation, reasonably wide color gamut, certainly better than average among notebook computers. And it's a little bit less glare prone. They both have an anti-glare coating on them, but there's a more sheen on the Sony VAIO Z actually. But still, it's better than most notebooks on the planet, and way better than the MacBook Pro when it comes to glare. But you can see there's more warmth here coming through. Now, this gives you almost 100% of Adobe full RGB color gamut right there. And the warm tones are shining through, the blues are more vivid, so it's a nicer display. And even though it's a TN panel, it still has a little bit wider viewing angles than the Sony VAIO S. Now that we've covered processing power and graphics, we'll talk about benchmarks a bit. Because of the SSD drive that's in the VAIO Z, the only way you can get it is with an SSD drive. It scores 17,000 on PC Mark Vantage, and that makes a big difference. PC Mark Vantage loves a nice SSD drive. Our Core i5 versus the Core i7 in the Z, here, 2.5 gigahertz, even with dedicated graphics turn-on, scored a more pedestrian 7,775. Now, if we put an SSD drive in this VAIO S, I'm sure it would just shoot right up and do much higher on benchmarks. So take that all with a grain of salt. Once you got that SSD drive in the equation, it all just goes to heck. And speaking of SSD drives, here's another important thing. For those of you who say, well, gee, I would like to get this premium VAIO S right here, and base price, again, you're starting at just above $1,100. Say you want to configure with 8 gigs of RAM, 4 is the starting for that price, and you want to get SSD drives. Sony offers their own SSD drives in a RAID configuration, not unlike what's done with the Z, though it has a normal SATA connector, so you can upgrade it yourself. I advise doing it yourself if you want to save some money. But anyway, you want the SSD, you want that 8 gigs of RAM right in there. Then you're already bringing the price up pretty close to what you're looking at on the Z. So, from a price perspective, those things are important to you and you really covet the Z because it's 2.5 pounds, oh my god, versus 3.69 pounds. It could actually make some economic sense to get the Z, and then you get that great 1080p display there. But what do you lose with the Z? Some important things, and some of you need this stuff. Now, Sony does a really, really good job of getting a lot of ports on the Z, given the fact that it's so ultra skinny and so ultra light. But the VAIO S, we have the optical drive right here, slot loading optical drive. You can get a DVD burner, a Blu-ray player, or even a Blu-ray burner if you want. So for those of you who need an optical drive, well, there it is. That's a pretty important thing. You also get some more ports on it, though. Not a whole lot more. You get separate memory stick duo and SD card slots. You have your VGA, HDMI, 2 USB 3.0 ports, and a legacy sleep and charge USB 2.0 port, and there's your gigabit Ethernet. Now if you look at the VAIO Z, skinny as it is, we have our gigabit Ethernet here, drop down configuration, HDMI port full size, 2 USB 3.0 ports, that's it, 2 versus 3 ports, no USB 2.0 port in case you have one of those older peripherals that gets cranky when it's plugged into a 3.0 port. Headphone jack right here, they both have that. And on this side we have the VGA port and nothing else. So what are you giving up when you get the Z? You're giving up a pound of weight versus the S, which is the good part, but you're losing an optical drive, you're losing the built-in dedicated graphics option. Again, there is a portable media dock for this that can bring the graphics up, though not quite to the level of what ships with the VAIO S. You're also going to get a smaller trackpad. This is a pretty small trackpad right here. And, you know, it actually works pretty well, though. I do find that I wander off when I'm using it, but it works well for 2-fingered. 3-fingered, you start to run out of room here, but tinier trackpad. Good drivers, that's what it is. Also, you get less key travel here. I still find it very typable. You adjust to it. The spacing is great. It's a nice chiclet keyboard, but less travel for those of you who hate that kind of very little travel thing. Probably won't like it. Backlit as well, this keyboard, and because it's more premium, you get a more premium looking backlight. It uses the ambient light sensor, and it has a kind of whitish yellowish glow, and it doesn't leak out around the edges of the keys, and it's a really nice, gentle but effective backlight. Whereas on the Sony VAIO S, you do see the light ring around the rings of each key, and not quite as pretty. Is that really important? Probably not so much. It's more of like the little premium touch that you get when you buy a Z. These VAIO buttons that you see on most all VAIO notebook computers, these are capacitive here instead of being mechanical clicky buttons. Again, not really important, just kind of adds that premium high-tech touch. Now we've got them side by side with lids closed, and you can see just about the same footprint. Of course, this one's a little bit smaller as you go front to back right here. And in terms of thickness, this guy's obviously going to be thinner. That's 0.66 inches versus 0.9 inches. Now, they don't look really that much different in person, but really it is the difference of the lid. If you took the lid off this, you would have the same thickness as the Z. Certainly, this feels more portable. It's psychotically portable. You pick this up, you just feel like it's absolutely nothing. Like, what's missing? There's no battery. Wow, you know. This, however, also really compares well with Ultrabooks. A lot of Ultrabooks are 3 to 3.5 pounds. It feels pretty much like them. I don't pick this up and think, oh my gosh, that feels heavy. I wouldn't want to carry this around. This is also very portable, but obviously the VAIO Z is your only 2.5 pound full processing notebook on the planet. That does set it apart. If that's important to you, the VAIO Z is for you. In terms of build quality, they're both put together beautifully. No complaints there. Carbon fiber on both of these. Nice looking machines. Now when it comes to battery life, they have similar capacity batteries. You've got a 4,000 milliamp battery in the VAIO Z, and you've got a 4,400 milliamp battery in the VAIO S. Runtimes are actually about the same on them if you're running on integrated graphics in both these machines, which means certainly 6 hours, you could really push it and maybe even get 7 hours. Really good battery life. Audio quality from the built-in speakers, both of these are pretty thin and tinny. The Z particularly more so. The smaller it is, the quieter it gets. Sony just never has really gone for really great built-in speakers on their most ultra-portable models. So with both of these, not awesome internal speakers. Put on some nice headphones though, and they sound great. By the way, the VAIO Z in the US is bundled with some noise-canceling Sony earbuds that sound pretty darn good. They know that their speakers aren't that good. Whenever that happens, just like with the old VAIO X, for those of you who remember that, they give you some earbuds to help you along. One point that's really important for those of you who want to make the machine last as long as it can and like to upgrade your parts after the fact, the VAIO Z is pretty much not upgradable. Both of these guys you can take off some screws on the bottom and you can get to the battery, and that's pretty awesome, especially for the VAIO Z, because you know how Ultrabooks are, usually everything's sealed inside, you can't even get to the battery yourself without going through a lot of work. Pretty easy on the VAIO Z. Also, this one, 2 screws, take it off, you have access to the battery. But with the VAIO Z, the memory is a proprietary card, and the SSD drive likewise is upgrades unlikely. So you're looking at your 8 gigs and whatever you get for your SSD drive, and if you can order a higher capacity SSD drive in RAID configuration afterwards from Sony for huge money, you could upgrade the drive probably. Not really the most fun machine to take apart. It is take apartable, but again, for those of you who really want to be able to upgrade your parts, the VAIO Z is not the machine for you. It's pretty much, it is what it is. The VAIO S is pretty easy. You just take off a panel on the bottom, like I said, you undo 2 standard Phillips head screws, and you have access to your RAM slot, you have access to the hard drive, you can put in an SSD drive if you want, or change capacities of that, and you have access to the battery. So there you have it, the VAIO Z versus the VAIO S, both 13-inch class notebooks, both very light, one being crazy light, the VAIO Z, but both being very portable, both having excellent build quality, similar keyboards. Obviously this one's going to be bigger on the VAIO S, more key travel, a little bit nicer to use, and you're going to get that higher resolution panel on the Z. So how do you decide between these? First off, ask yourself, are you looking for a premium experience? Are you looking for a status symbol? Are you looking for something that's 2.5 pounds and slips in your briefcase very easily? Well, the VAIO Z is really the machine there. Not that the premium version of the VAIO S isn't pretty nice, pretty premium, and a status symbol in itself, but it's really hard to pass the VAIO Z right now, unless you're talking about some of the MacBook Pros. Also, is display important to you? The full Adobe RGB color gamut, or almost full, that you get on the VAIO Z, well, that's a rarity. You just don't see that in many notebooks, and that is a big selling point, especially in conjunction with the 1080p display. The thing about the 1080p display is, how good are your eyes? Are you okay with really pretty small text, no matter how sharp it is? Of course, you can run it at lower resolutions if you need to. Something to keep in mind. If you're happy with a better than normal resolution 1600 by 900 panel with nice colors on it, a pretty good color gamut, well, the VAIO S does the job. And are you looking for an all-around computer? Is this kind of going to be your main machine? Maybe you're taking it to school, or it's your everyday business machine, you're taking it on the road. If so, having the most ports, having the optical drive, those kind of things could be a selling point, making the VAIO S a more practical all-around computer. And lastly, there's the price difference. We're talking about a machine that, if you get the base model, starts at $799 versus $1599. If you go up to the premium, you're looking at $1,100 versus $1,599 to $2,000, depending whether you want the Core i5 or Core i7 in your VAIO Z. So there's a price difference. But as I mentioned, for those of you who are going to buy the premium model and then start glomming on all the possible add-ons, upgrading your memory to 8 or 12 gigs of RAM, and particularly the SSD drive, that's where you add the expense, you're starting to look at about the same price. You can bring this guy up to about $1,550, the VAIO S, and then obviously you're looking at the starting point for the Core i5 version of the VAIO Z. But that's not including the portable media dock. If you need that dedicated graphics to bring them on parity, also a very important point for those of you who want to game or do video editing or a lot of image editing, you've got to spend $400 for that portable media dock to get an external GPU that's really not quite up to snuff of the 640 NVIDIA that's in the VAIO S. So for those of you who really need dedicated graphics and need it inside the machine, you don't want to be carrying around something about the size of a portable CD drive, again, the VAIO S really starts to make more sense. So I hope those points have helped you figure out which of these might be better for you. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to read our reviews of both of these machines, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our video reviews of these machines as well.